第一个是绿色能源方面，第二个是次新材料方面。那近年来因为业界的专利发达的话，那我们衍生出我们几乎是全台湾的调料系最重要的独特的特色，就是材料专利布局的特色的领域。那非常感谢王美心老师在这一方面的努力以及贡献。那今天非常高兴能够参加这个2017翻转化学教育的研讨会。那希望各位参加这个研讨会以后，能够得到很多而且翻转你的人生。谢谢各位。也预祝大会圆满成功。谢谢。
Well, thank you very much for that wonderfully kind introduction. Since I speak not a word of Chinese, I'm going to have Professor Wang to translate my talk, and she'll probably improve on it actually as she talks. So, the basic issue is electronic flavor synthesis, and I will talk about what that means here in a moment.
Professor John Cross 呢，今天要来跟我们讲的题目呢，是有关于这个数位的香气的这个技术。
So let's first talk about the technology. So the basic idea is digitalizing the senses. And so we started out digitalizing senses with sight, followed shortly thereafter by sound.
所以其实这个数位科技呢，一开始呢，我们是从感官看到的特征，然后就看到图表，然后很快听觉，我们看到那些电子耳的技术，那甚至结合这个嗅觉，都慢慢的发展起来。
But other than the distant senses, the close senses, touch, smell, and taste, we've had very little progress.
但是呢，就是不管是我们说触控的感觉，或者是这个味觉跟我们这个口感的这个部分，怎么样用晶片、用各位电子的专长、用科技的这个结合，这个部分呢，目前还在发展当中。
But all that's starting to change. But I'm going to focus mostly or exclusively on the sense of taste and the input of flavor.
他说呢，他是今天要 focus 在这个味道感觉，我们是怎么闻到这些香气，我们怎么感觉到大脑这个讯号怎么传导。
You would think that flavor would be very easy to synthesize. There are only 5 components to flavor, and the organ we have to detect flavor, the taste bud, is a fairly simple organ.
他说呢，我们都知道5种基本的口感，就是酸、甜、苦、咸，还有鲜味，对不对？那其实我们以为只有我们的味蕾会有感觉，但是事实上做了研究，有发现这个感官涉及的部分呢是挺复杂的。
But in fact, flavor is a very, very difficult sense to synthesize because our flavor of taste is quite complex.
那我们上过化学课，也跟各位介绍过，味道的合成其实是很复杂的。那有一些甚至也不能够人工合成，所以是有很多天然的香气、合成的香气。
As just one example, if you've ever had cold, you know that things taste differently or less rich.
他说还有呢，为什么我们说不是只有靠味觉？你感冒的时候甚至感觉不到那个口感呢？所以你知道一定有其他的感官组合在里面，让你有这些正确的感知。
But there's also other factors that go into taste. It's not just what contacts our taste buds. Tactile sensation, warmth, can also affect how we taste things.
然后他说呢，不是只有我们自己的感觉，包括温度。我们上过化学课之后知道，温度会影响这些香味，对不对？像肉类的这个加热型的这个香气。
There are also personal differences. The way the two of us perceive a given taste may differ.
然后人跟人也不太一样，比如同样酸不酸、苦不苦、甜不甜、咸不咸，大家的感觉也不太一样。
So when you get to taste synthesis, it's much more complex than it seems. But I'm going to focus not on chemical synthesis of taste, but on digital.
但是他今天要告诉我们更新颖的是用数位的方式来做合成，不是我们传统的合成。
So if we could, the reason I'm focusing on digital, if you could digitalize flavor, and I'll talk about the progress here shortly, you would have several possible advantages.
他说，如果能用数位来合成，是比我们用人工合成来的更方便的，就是自动化。
Digital flavor would be non-destructive. It could last forever, just like digital music on a CD can last forever.
然后说，如果是数位制造出来的香味，就不会消散出去啊，它可以保持比较久。
Unlike chemical synthesis, you don't need to have a collection of chemicals if it's a digital flavor input.
如果它是用数位的方式合成，也会有那些化学污染啊这些复杂的步骤。
And since we are all slaves to the internet, if you could digitalize flavor, you could actually transfer flavors over vast distances.
他说呢，另外就是我们是用数位的方式，我们要做传送运输，是不是就更方便更快？
So again, the technology currently is at a very young stage, and then there's several things that stand in the way of effective digital synthesis.
那当然，现在我们其实在前一阵子电视有广告过了，对不对？有用这个手机欧的香味，你在这边送一个花香给美国的朋友就收到了，但是它还很出前面还很前期的研究。
The biggest problem is to develop an interface with the taste organs, sort of like a speaker interfaces with our ears.
所以现在他就说这个界面很重要，所以各位电子系的同学就是你们专长。
So the technology as it now stands focuses on some sort of electrical stimulus on the tongue, and then fluctuations in temperature, sometimes coupled with vibrations, to pick up that tactile component of taste.
但是这个口感的这个制成啊，那很多的东西，很多的因素会干扰，比如说波电啊、温度啊、震动啊、波啊，这些都会影响它。
The biggest problem to date is the lack of anything that picks up the importance of smell in the way we detect flavor.
所以现在很想努力的就是味觉如何把它数位化，因为听觉已经有了，对不对？
The most interesting thing is what's been called in the media the digital lullaby.
那现在最有名的就是这个数位棒。
As you can see, it's not a very attractive device. It's a rather clumsy interface with the tongue, but it provides electrical stimulus and alters the temperature.
虽然现在看起来很不是那么完美、那么优雅哦，但是它其实就是靠这个电流这个传导，所以已经有了雏形。
And of the 5 flavor components in the standard definition, it could replicate 4 of those.
那当然它一定有专利啊，有智慧财产权，但是已经有4个。我们刚刚说先天目前已经登记完了，但纤维还没有，纤维比较难。
So something along the lines of a digital lollipop, improved, may allow for all the advantages of digital synthesis.
所以这个我们的数位合成已经有一个雏形，从这里我们可以看到它的未来，这个数位棒的发展。
So the next part of my talk, the remainder of my talk, deals with legal issues that arise in the area of flavor synthesis. But I'm only going to focus on 2 today. One are trademark law issues, the other copyright law issues.
那专利的部分呢，各位同学做的很多了，所以他今天要跟我们比较专注在这个商标跟著作权来跟我们做说明。
And between the 2, I'm going to spend more time on copyright because those issues are a little less technical if you've not had a solid background in the field.
他说的，那他会比较专注在这个著作权的部分。
So quickly on the trademark issues, here's some of the attributes of digital flavors. First, you can easily alter or change a digital flavor.
他说呢，其实你可以改变，因为它既然是数位化，修改程式是不是很快？
Second, you could create a flavor that exists by itself. Flavor normally is in connection with a commodity, pizza, but a digital flavor can exist entirely divorced of a physical object.
那它现在呢，跟我们过去观念不一样。我们拿到苹果才有味道，对不对？拿到披萨有披萨味道。现在你不要披萨，不要苹果，你也可以把那味道制造出来。
You also can have flavors associated with non-ingested or eaten items. Pizza has a flavor. We eat pizza. You could also attach a digital flavor to something as mundane as this clicker.
他说呢，比如说，如果你想要安神，你按个这个薰衣草，按一下就有味道，你不一定真的去拿个薰衣草过来，对不对？
And these features are relevant not only to trademark law, but also to a number of different areas of legal protection.
那它有很多法律上可以保护它权利的方式，只是我觉得不专利。
There's 2 trademark situations we need to distinguish. One is if you have a product with a well-known flavor, and I use Coca-Cola in the paper, and someone else synthesizes that flavor and uses it for another purpose.
那现在就麻烦了，如果数位可以合成，本来可口可乐的味道是可口可乐加的，你用数位合成的，那现在就开始有商标上的问题，你可能用在别的地方，做在沙拉上。
And the second is if the seller of a non-consumed product, such as a clicker, develops an artificial flavor and tries to get trademark rights in that flavor.
那现在你就可以拥有你自己的商标，那对于传统的市场这些商品是造成了一种冲击，所以整个市场状态又有新的影响了。
So first, borrowing the well-known flavor, if I borrow Coca-Cola and attach it via a digital file to this clicker, it's a fundamental principle of trademark law that you cannot acquire a trademark in a flavor for a consumer.
那在很多国家，味道是没有办法去申请智慧财产权专利。那它有营业秘密，但是它没有申请成商标。当然，欧洲现在有一些味道是可以，像Chanel No. 5。
So given that, basically it would seem that another seller would be free to borrow the flavor of Coca-Cola and attach it to a product that wasn't similar to Coca-Cola.
但现在如果说各位电子系的同学，你自己把可口可乐味道用电子数位合成的，然后你可能装在手机，装在哪里，那这样可口可乐可不可以告你？
There's one exception which I won't bore you with. So second, let's talk about trademarks in flavors themselves. When you create a new flavor and attach it to a non-ingested item, where in theory you could acquire trademark rights.
那可是现在如果说是你自己创造出来特别的味道、个人化的味道，那你当然就可以申请商标，放在你想要的商品了。
Here we run into the basic principle that says you cannot acquire a trademark in a flavor.
那过去单纯的味道，因为它抓不到、摸不到，又很难复制，所以它是没有办法申请这个商标的。
And if we look at the reasons for that rule, we can reduce them to 4. The first is a technical rule that some nations say you only get trademarks in things we can see, visual perception.
那过去的这个大家传统的经验是，你看得见的东西才可以申请商标。
The second bar is that whenever we try to have flavor trademarks, it's always been in connection with a food or drink.
那现在说，但是味道在食物或饮料方面有特别的可以来许可申请什么商标，比如说 cheese， 好吧？
The third obstacle is you must show it's a feature of a product. To acquire a trademark, you must show that people view the feature not as a feature but as an indicator of source.
那现在就是你的商标必须真的特征化，可以跟别人区别，这是法律的基本要件。
And the fourth reason is very practical. Trademarks allow us to make guesses about what we buy. With a flavor, traditionally you had to buy it, eat it, and then you could judge the quality.
那以前呢，就是有商标是帮你推荐产品，可是现在如果是这种味道的商标，你不但是智慧财产权保护它，你还想要吃它，可能对后面还有很多相关的法律都会用得到。
But if we turn to digital flavors, you could overcome arguably 3 of those 4 problems. The visual perceptible rule you couldn't overcome, but arguably the other 3 you could.
那现在说，那如果今天是数位香味呢？那跟我们传统的香味，它的法律地位要怎么样来区别呢？
So first, flavor is the problem. Well, if I've divorced the flavor from the product, if the flavor exists in isolation, it's no longer deemed to be the product itself.
那现在实体跟这个香味就剥离成2个标的了。
Second, the idea of secondary meaning. I think it's more likely that people would think a flavor attached to an item like this would indicate source than they would think of as a flavor in an eaten product.
那传统的时候，比如说香槟，你就想到香槟区的酒，然后 Burgundy 你就想到 Burgundy， 它有时候这些会影响到你，但是现在这个香味能不能跟商品或这些传统的权利相连结呢？有很多值得考虑的地方。
Third, again, the practical problem that you have to acquire the product in order to experience the flavor wouldn't be true for a digital flavor. You could perceive, for example, of an internet wine tasting, where you had a digital flavor transmitted to a prospective buyer by the internet.
所以以后呢，你这个品酒不用大家面对面的，大家在网络上就可以把味道传过去了，然后这个世界又有一个新的改变，大家要来学习跟面对。
So there are practical issues. The biggest practical question is we have to change buyers' mindsets so that they would think of a digital flavor, at least when used in connection with a non-ingested product, as an indicator of source.
那以前我们看到一个商品味觉跟它连接的讯息都是传统目的，但是现在我们必须把它 分开，我们的思考模式要改变。
And I'll leave that to the marketing people whether that's even possible.
那有一些行销专业的人就来处理这后续的这些行销跟商业的问题了。
Let's turn then to copyright issues, because I think the copyright issues are a little more policy-laden and perhaps better for discussion.
然后为什么他比较强调著作权呢？因为在很多国家，软体是属于著作权保护。
So what we're talking about here is you've come up with a new flavor, and you're attempting to claim copyright protection, which would prevent others from replicating that same flavor.
好，那为什么讲著作权保护？因为著作权保护不用登记，不用缴钱。
There's been some discussion of copyright in flavors. I don't think any of it's particularly relevant. Most of it focuses on flavor, or on recipes actually, not individual flavors, but recipes. There's also a wonderful 2015 decision in the Netherlands that said the flavor of a cheese could be copyrighted, but rejected copyright for that particular flavor.
那荷兰的法院呢有个判决，就是说在欧洲呢，香味可以用著作权保护，因为它是有新的制成。好，可是呢，在这个特别的案件，比如说我们说去死是真的可以著作权保护，但这个案件之所以没被核准，是你就算用著作权保护，你也要有独特性、创新性、可区别性。
So let's explore further whether flavor can acquire copyright.
那现在我们讨论一下，到底他用哪一种智慧财产权来保护比较合适呢？
Two basic questions. One, is a flavor within the subject matter of copyright? Two, when would infringement occur? I will focus only on the first.
好，那他其实会强调在这个第一个问题啊，就是它到底是法定标的，然后还有就是说，因为著作权不用登记，是你自己去举证，那你怎么知道什么时候开始侵权呢？
So, and I have to say at this point, whenever I presented this paper in academic audiences, everyone says, why would you want to protect flavor with copyright? I'm not saying I want to, I'm just saying that people will try.
那现在就说，他们这个学派比较鼓励用著作权来保护味的香味，但是当然有很多不同的见解，我们当做是可以不同的方式。
So, in many nations, when you define the subject matter of copyright, it's defined in a way that would exclude flavor.
那现在说，如果你要用著作权来保护，它必须是一个独立而且有一个自己单一性的一个味道。
That's easy to fix. It would simply require a legislative change to recognize a new category of work, a gustatory work, or something along those lines.
他说，那这样的情况，只要在法律上做一点修正就可以，就把它列进来，法律要做一点的修正事宜。
The main bars, once we get over the legislative hurdle, the main bars, I think, to copyright and flavor are 5: functionality, originality, time and situational variability, individual differences in perception, and flavor. Is flavor even expression?
所以，当我们要来表现、要来证明它可以符合著作权要件的时候，那么这个商品做出来，它的功能性、原创性，到底什么时间状况会不会有差异？然后，它的个别的不同的人会有多少的这个影响范围，或者是相互的表达，都必须先把它定义好。
So first, functionality. First, I'll point out that it's actually hard to find a functionality doctrine in copyright. We have it in other areas. It's not clear we actually have one in copyright, but I don't think that's a big issue. Because even if the flavor of pizza is functional, an artificial flavor for a non-ingested good is in no way functional.
他说功能当然我们用专利就比较好定义，可是你用著作权其实就比较难。但是他说呢，那人工做出来的这个味道，它我们说不定可以想一个方法把它建立起来。
The second hurdle is originality. I don't think it's a categorical bar, but I think we have to revisit what it is we mean by originality.
那现在就是对于这个原创性，那说香味这一类，那它的原创性我们怎么样的定义？
Most flavors, because flavor really only has 5 components, most original flavors in the classic sense are really just derivative.
他说呢，其实就是刚刚香味，就我们说的酸甜苦咸跟鲜味，那很多的味道是这几种基本要件的一个组合。
And so one solution might be for a legislature to consider a higher bar to originality in something like a flavor.
那所以在进步性或创造性的部分，可能就这5个基本要件跟你做出来的这个人工合成，在这里面符合哪些的标准条件，那慢慢的来设立一个法治标准。
I will point out that digital flavors present a greater opportunity for real creativity. It's much easier to alter a digital file in a way that would drastically change the flavor than to spend the time in the kitchen coming up with a new foodstuff.
他说，如果我们修改一下软体，就可以改变很多的味道，那当然比在厨房工厂花很多力气制造很多污染，那当然是好多了。
The third bar is variability. Some people have said, well, you could never copyright a flavor because, as we've already discussed today, you and I might perceive of a flavor differently, or in a different situation, a single person might recognize the same flavor in a different way.
他说呢，那我们说个人的感知有差异，比如说有苦，你觉得苦，他觉得不苦；有辣，你觉得不辣。所以在这里面，需要把这些要件、条件、规范把它定义。
I don't quite understand why this is a big issue, because we have the same sorts of variability in other areas of copyright, and we don't perceive it as a problem. For a personal example, I'm blue-green colorblind. I don't distinguish blue and green well, but no one argues that because of that, Monet could not get a copyright in the watercolors.
他说他其实有一点绿色跟蓝色的色盲，那所以他说呢，也不因为这样子，像莫内不就也是色盲？他画了那么好的那个有名的莲花那系列画，因为这样我们就不能够确认他的著作权，对不对？
And second, I think it's less of an issue for digital flavors, that because you can fix the flavor in a digital file and come up with a standardized input device, you might not have that. So you have the individual variability, but not the situational and time variability.
那现在就说呢，我们说数位化的这个香味，它比较不会老化，比较不会变坏，但是也不当然我们没有说它一定都不会变坏，是我们经过我们的这个装置之后我们的这个装置设备，那我们怎么样子来做控制？那这也是一个可以把它法制化来做一个介入系统来做推广这个香味在用著作权保护的一个方式。
Individual differences in perception, again, the fact that different people perceive flavors differently, again, I don't see how that's a big issue, sort of the same issue as the product.
那他说呢，虽然大家对香味会有一些个体上的差异，但是他觉得这不是什么太大的问题，好像是程度上差异而已。
But I think the biggest hurdle to copyright and flavor is flavor a form of expression? Copyright doesn't protect ideas, it protects expressions of ideas.
那著作权比较特别是它保护的是你的表现，而不是光idea。你要把一个形式表现出来，不管你用影音、你用文字、你用电脑程式，它必须有一个形式的存在。
I think it's clear, at least in the area of real-world flavors, that people intend for flavor to be an expression. One of the articles I mentioned interviewed a number of famous chefs, and they sort of described what they were trying to express, frivolity of something in a dish.
那以后呢，厨师就在电脑这边做味道就好了，不用在全世界收集各式各样的香料。
But it's not enough for the speaker to intend something to be a message. It's also important for the listener to perceive of it as a message.
他说呢，今天的重点不是他来告诉你这个香味到底应该怎么样来法制化、怎么样规范，而是各位听到之后一起来贡献，让这个系统、这个新的一个技术它的保护要怎么样让这个社会变得更好，就仰赖大家一起的努力。
Now, it's entirely unimportant that two different people in the room might perceive different messages, but it is important that everyone or most people perceive of there being a message there in the first place.
那他现在说呢，就算大家今天听完又有不同的意见，那也没有关系，但是你已经开始让这个创意在你的脑袋萌芽。
And here I think digital flavor also has an inherent advantage, again because it can exist in isolation of any other product or service.
那说呢，因为这个味道呢，现在跟过去的实体物结晶剥离，所以它可能衍生更多新的商品跟服务跑出来，所以有新的商品也是会衍生出来的。
So that's all I have to say. I hope you have comments, questions, or if not, just enjoy the real flavor in the room.
他说呢，谢谢大家。